All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, hold on. There you go. Got to stop myself from phasing. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. This is the Nightmarish Battle of Trafalgar. Trafalgar. 8. Hey, Jackson. I'm recording. 1805, Nelson versus Napoleonic Navy. I did this through Epic History, and I was told that this is more of a movie, kind of like a short movie about it, and it is a little better. So we're going to do that one. We're going to do this one. Before we get started, I already subscribed, so I'd remember. Somebody click that thumbs up. Watch. That's all it took. If you could do that for me, it helps out tremendously. I also have a thanks button. You can click on that, donate to the channel, request a video. Your name sponsors the video. All right, let's get into it.
World. And with today's sponsor, MyHeritage, I explored my family tree. Real quick, my ancestry traces back all over the world. And with today's sponsor, MyHeritage, I explored my family tree and discovered one ancestor's name pops up in the Salem witch trials. More on that and how you can use MyHeritage to discover your history toward the end of the video.
I used 23andMe. I don't know anything about MyHeritage. I used 23andMe, did an awesome thing. You can do my channel DNA results if you're interested. It's pretty cool. I did a video about it, yes.
It was on this coast in another age that the army of Julius Caesar departed to invade Britain. The same ambition has called Emperor Napoleon to these shores. Across 75 miles, he's arrayed over 100,000 men, whom he writes are waiting only for a favorable wind in order to plant the imperial eagle on the Tower of London. But the seas are patrolled by the Royal Navy, and the British have further blockaded much of the enemy French and Spanish fleets in harbors across Europe. Napoleon, as calculating and brave as he is brutal, devises a plan. He believes his fleets can slip the blockades in key ports, shake the British ships across the Atlantic, and sail into the English Channel to escort his invasion army. He declares, "Let us be masters of the Channel for 6 hours, and we are masters of the world." French Vice Admiral Villeneuve, pinned down in Toulon, breaks out with his fleet in the spring of 1805. It will be days before the British realize. The one who will chase him is the bane of the high seas himself, the dread of every French sailor. Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson. In Nelson's heart burns a fervent love of king and country, a loyalty to Old England, its heroes and traditions and also its colonial iniquities. Admired by his enemies and lionized by his countrymen, Nelson fights in an age of great bloodshed. The old crowns of Europe rose to war years ago as France violently cast off its monarchy, and in time they faced a dictator dressed in the language and promises of the late Revolution. Napoleon has mastered the battlefield, but Nelson has mastered the seas. It was
since we're talking about dictators and kings and all that stuff, and the MyHeritage, they were holding up the head of a relative of mine, King Louis XVI. You know.
Nelson, who smashed the French fleet during Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798. Nelson, who triumphed at Copenhagen in 1801. He lost his arm in battle some years ago, and he will stop at nothing to eradicate the French fleet, earlier writing, "I would willingly have half of my fleet burnt to effect their destruction. I am in a fever. God send we may find them." Nelson now approaches the West Indies, where Villeneuve has been reinforced with more Spanish and French ships. Having drawn the British out, Villeneuve will not wait for further reinforcements. He darts back across the Atlantic to the Spanish coast. After a foggy, inconclusive skirmish against some British warships, Villeneuve receives orders from the Emperor to sail into the Channel for the invasion of England. Sighting British warships, Villeneuve instead sails for Cadiz, where a British blockade promptly pins his fleet in the harbor. British blockades have for years deprived the French of supplies and naval experience. All the while, the British have bolstered their mighty fleet, manned by both volunteers and men conscripted through impressment. A practice whereby thousands of civilians, mostly those with seafaring experience, are seized by press gangs and forced into service, sons and fathers stolen away for years to come. The sailors are fed and paid, trained and brutally disciplined, and imbued with the fighting naval spirit of Britain. The power of the Royal Navy notwithstanding, Napoleon cannot tarry while his admirals refuse to engage. To the east, the Austrians and Russians have begun to marshal their armies against him. So Napoleon has the invasion camps abandoned and leads his army to war. Outside Cadiz, Horatio Nelson arrives in his towering HMS Victory of over 100 guns and assumes command of the British fleet. Villeneuve defies orders from Napoleon to break the...
I just want to say HMS Victory is such a, I don't know what it is, it's just a good name. It's just a good name.
...blockade and sail into the Mediterranean. He will not risk battle until he learns that the Emperor has sent a vice admiral to replace him, a threat to his honor. The morning of October 19th, the Franco-Spanish fleet sets out in the direction of Cape Trafalgar, and the British notice. Napoleon, in the midst of vanquishing the Austrian force at Ulm, still laments, "Soldiers, we should this day have been in London. We should have avenged ourselves for 6 centuries of insults and restored the freedom of the seas." Unbeknownst to him, the battle for the ocean is about to begin. The morning of the 21st, Nelson bears down on the Franco-Spanish fleet. The British are outnumbered. 27 ships of the line to 33, 17,000 men to 30,000. But the British are far better trained, and Nelson has long planned this day. Rather than line up and fire at range, which would allow his foes to escape if needed, Nelson plans to charge in 2 columns, splitting the staggered enemy line in 3 parts and allowing his gun crews to thrive in destructive chaos. Nelson leads the northern column in the Victory, while Vice Admiral Collingwood leads the southern column in the Royal Sovereign. The wind in their sails is faint, so the approach is a long drift. Bands play patriotic tunes, hours pass. And when every gun, rope, and sail is in place, all the men can do is wait, like beasts to the slaughter. By signal flags, Nelson relays the message: England expects that every man will do his duty. At 1,000 yards out, the French and Spanish guns heavily bombard the leading British ships. Sails tear, beams crack. Angled forward, the British lack an effective way to return fire. Most men simply take cover. A 16-year-old English boy in his first battle sees a comrade's head shot away and writes, "My ears rang with the shrieks of the wounded and the moans of the dying." Collingwood breaks the line first and smashes a broadside into a Spanish ship. The massacre begins. In the north, Nelson's Victory approaches under a barrage of several ships, including Villeneuve's French flagship and the massive Spanish Santísima Trinidad, a 4-decker with 136 guns. Nelson stands unflinching on the quarterdeck. A shot smashes the wheel, from then on forcing 40 men to steer the Victory from below by verbal commands. Next to Nelson, Secretary Scott is blown in half by a cannonball. At last, the Victory breaks the line behind Villeneuve's ship. Double and triple-shotted guns blast 1.5 tons of iron into the French stern, instantly killing and maiming hundreds of Villeneuve's crew. The Victory then comes alongside the French 74-gun Redoutable. Guns thunder in the choking air. Under no illusions about matching rapid British cannon fire, the French have packed their ships with infantry, who now unleash musket fire and grenades on the Victory's upper deck. A French marksman shoots down Horatio Nelson. Nelson collapses, announces that his backbone is shot through, and he's carried below decks. The crew of the shorter Redoutable then lowers the main yard and begins to board the Victory with swords, hatchets, and pistols. But a British ship comes to the aid of the Victory and fires a terrible broadside into the Redoutable. Masts of both ships crash down as the cannons continue. The French decks are strewn with dripping entrails and screaming sailors. The captain records 522 casualties out of a crew of just over 600. Really, I know of nothing on board that had not been hit by shot. In the midst of this horrible carnage and devastation, my splendid fellows who had not been killed kept cheering, "Long live the Emperor." The battle all around has morphed into clusters of ships exchanging fire. The wounded are carried down to the dark and groaning lower decks, where surgeons saw off mangled limbs and tend to the wretched and the dying. In the belly of the Victory, Horatio Nelson has lost all feeling below his chest. Certain of his own demise, he instructs the surgeon to direct his attention to the other wounded. Nelson can hear the crew above him cheer with each enemy ship captured, and a brief visit from his friend, Captain Thomas Hardy, provides him with updates on the battle. A rout looks certain as the day wears on. The British encircle and pummel their targets, while enemy ships that have turned to engage from the north make only a half-hearted attack. Hardy goes down again to see Lord Nelson and informs him that victory is at hand, that the British have not lost a ship and 14 or 15 enemy vessels have surrendered. Nelson strains. "That is well, but I bargained for 20. After some last words, Hardy kisses his friend on the cheek and then the forehead. "God bless you, Hardy," Nelson says. And thereafter he repeats the phrase, "Thank God I have done my duty." Horatio Nelson dies sometime after 4 o'clock. Upon hearing of his death, British sailors and captains alike will sob openly. As the sun begins to set, a fire aboard the French ship Achille reaches the magazine. The brilliant eruption and the last bellow of the drowning ship signal the imminent end of the Battle of Trafalgar. The ocean teems with splinters and sail, limbs and corpses thrown overboard, and treading survivors gasping for rescue. British dead and wounded number around 1,700, while the French and Spanish count roughly 7,000, with an equal number taken prisoner. While some have managed to flee, over half of the Franco-Spanish fleet is captured, to be taken as British prizes. The Spanish and French, both of Catholic tradition, keep all their dead on board for a proper burial on land. One 16-year-old British sailor boards the Santissima Trinidad and writes, "She had between 300 and 400 killed and wounded. Her beams were covered with blood, brains, and pieces of flesh." The French and Spanish recapture a few vessels. Several more are lost as a dark hurricane thrashes the bleeding ships for the next week. A French sailor witnesses survivors of the battle wreck against the coast. The wounded were shrieking. When the tide was out, they dragged themselves along on those limbs that were not maimed, and sought to avoid the death that they found further on. Franco-Spanish naval power is shattered, as are Napoleon's future plans of invading Britain. In England, celebration of the triumph at Trafalgar is stifled by the grave loss of the people.
Sorry, dog knocked over a light. I'm glitching.
People's hero, slain in the hour of victory. The grieving public will watch the procession of Nelson's regal state funeral, an affair decorated by flags captured at Trafalgar and attended by the prisoner of war, Villeneuve. Villeneuve returns to France in the spring by means of a prisoner swap. Napoleon has suppressed news of the defeat at Trafalgar, but Villeneuve is nonetheless disgraced, an embarrassment to the Emperor. Shortly after his return, Villeneuve is found dead in a hotel room. Officials point to a final note and maintain that he died by his own hand. But the cause of death is 6 stab wounds to the lung and 1 to the heart, and naturally, questions linger. Trafalgar has inaugurated lasting British dominance over the seas, but Napoleon soon after brilliantly crushed his enemies on land at the Battle of Austerlitz, and forced the final dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. Napoleon grows in power, and the war for Europe continues. Our ancestors lived through incredible times, but researching my family's history always seemed daunting. I'm Filipino.
All right, that was pretty good. So I was told this is like a mini movie. Hold on. I wish it would just... It's going to phase in and out, isn't it? So, yeah, it's going to glitch. Yeah, I was told this is kind of like a mini movie, and that's exactly what it was. It didn't have the detail that was it the Kings and Generals, or was it History March? I confuse them sometimes. It didn't have the detail that they have. I think it was Kings and Generals, but this was set up like, yeah, it was more of a mini movie. This was really good. All right. I'm not going to go through the My Heritage thing. We'll go ahead and end it here. But I enjoyed this. Like I said, I subscribed to the channel. I'm going to check out a few more of their videos. I really like the channel. So I'm going to end this here. But until next time, have a good day, have a good night.